My family mocked my small apartment until I revealed my $5 portfolio. I was sitting in my 450 square foot studio apartment, eating instant ramen when my brother called to invite me to our cousin's wedding. The conversation started normally until he mentioned that everyone would be staying at this fancy resort, and I could feel the judgment in his voice when I said I'd probably just drive back home each night. He suggested I should maybe upgrade my lifestyle now that I'm in my 30s, and I just mumbled something about being comfortable where I am. My apartment wasn't much to look at from the outside. The building was old, the hallways smelled like curry and cigarettes, and the elevator made concerning noises. But inside my small space, I had everything I needed. A Murphy bed, a compact desk where I did most of my work, and a kitchen that was basically a hot plate and a mini fridge. My family had been making comments about my living situation for years, especially during holiday gatherings when everyone compared mortgage payments and renovation projects. The wedding was supposed to be a celebration, but I knew it would turn into another intervention about my life choices. My parents had been subtly suggesting I should settle down, get a real place, maybe start thinking about the future. They meant well, but they didn't understand that I was perfectly content with my minimalist lifestyle. I had no debt, no stress about property taxes or maintenance, and I could pretty much pick up and travel whenever I wanted. The night before the wedding, I was scrolling through my investment app like I did every evening before bed. The numbers glowed back at me from my phone screen, and I felt that familiar sense of satisfaction. Most people my age were drowning in mortgage payments and credit card debt, but I had been quietly building something different. While they were buying bigger houses and newer cars, I was buying index funds, growth stocks, and the occasional cryptocurrency position. My investment strategy had started almost by accident 5 years ago, when I inherited a small amount from my grandmother. Instead of spending it on furniture or a car upgrade, I decided to learn about investing. I spent months reading financial books, watching YouTube videos, and practicing with paper trading. What started as a few $1,000s had grown into something much more substantial through consistent contributions and compound growth. The wedding day arrived and I put on my best suit, which admittedly wasn't saying much. The ceremony was beautiful, held at this sprawling country club with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the parking lot. I felt underdressed and out of place, but I tried to focus on celebrating my cousin's happiness. During the cocktail hour, my uncle cornered me and started his usual routine about how I should be thinking about building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. He was gesturing with his whiskey glass, talking about property values and tax benefits, when my aunt joined the conversation. She mentioned that her neighbor's son had just bought a condo and how proud his parents were. The implication was clear. I was the family disappointment, the one who couldn't get his act together. I nodded politely and excused myself to get another drink, but I could feel the frustration building in my chest. During dinner, the conversation at our table turned to real estate, as it always did with my family. My brother was talking about his recent kitchen renovation, my sister was complaining about her homeowners association fees, and my parents were discussing whether they should downsize now that we were all grown up. I sat there quietly, picking at my salmon, while they threw out numbers and percentages like they were competing in some kind of financial Olympics. Then my dad made a comment that hit differently than usual. He said something about how I was wasting my prime earning years, and that time was running out to build real wealth. He wasn't trying to be mean, but his words stung because they came from a place of genuine concern. He thought I was failing at life, and in his mind, my small apartment was proof of that failure. My cousin's new husband stood up to give a toast, and he talked about building a life together, about dreams and goals and creating something lasting. I watched my family's faces as they smiled and nodded, and I realized they saw me as someone who had given up on those dreams. In their eyes, I was settling for less, choosing the easy path, avoiding the responsibilities that came with real adulthood. But sitting there in my rented tuxedo, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of being misunderstood. These people loved me, but they had no idea who I really was or what I had accomplished. They saw the surface, the small apartment, the simple lifestyle, the lack of traditional markers of success, and they made assumptions about my worth as a person. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my dad's words and the way my family looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my investment accounts, something I rarely did all at once. I preferred to check them individually, but tonight I wanted to see the complete picture. The numbers were even better than I remembered. My portfolio had crossed a milestone I had been working toward for years. Between my index funds, individual stocks, real estate investment trusts, and cryptocurrency holdings, I was sitting on just over $5 million. The realization hit me like a physical force. I was wealthier than everyone who had been giving me advice about my life choices. While they were paying mortgages and car loans, I had been building actual wealth. I spent the next few days thinking about whether to tell them. Part of me wanted to keep it private, to continue living my quiet life without the complications that come with family knowing about money. But another part of me was tired of being treated like the family failure, tired of the concerned looks and helpful suggestions about getting my life together. My brother called a few days later to check on me, which was sweet but also felt patronizing. He asked if I was doing okay financially, if I needed any help with anything. He mentioned that our parents were worried about me, that they thought I might be struggling more than I was letting on. The conversation was the final straw. I decided it was time to set the record straight. I invited the whole family over for dinner at my apartment the following weekend. They seemed surprised by the invitation, since I usually avoided hosting anything in my small space. I could practically hear them whispering to each other about what this meant, whether I was finally ready to ask for help or make some big life change. The day of the dinner, I ordered food from their favorite restaurant and set up my tiny table with folding chairs borrowed from my neighbor. When they arrived, I could see them taking in the space with fresh eyes. The Murphy bed folded into the wall, the minimal furniture, the complete lack of clutter. My mom made a comment about how clean everything was, but I could tell she was still worried about my living situation. We ate and talked about normal family things, work, weather, upcoming birthdays. But I could feel the unspoken concern in the room, the way they carefully avoided mentioning anything about my apartment or my lifestyle choices. Finally, after dessert, I decided it was time to have the conversation I had been avoiding for years. I pulled out my laptop and opened up my investment dashboard. The screen showed my portfolio allocation, my current net worth, and my year-to-date returns. I turned the laptop around so they could see the numbers, and I watched their faces as they processed what they were looking at. The room went completely silent. My dad was the first to speak, asking if those numbers were real. I logged into each account individually, showing them the detailed breakdowns, the transaction histories, the growth charts over the past 5 years. My brother kept shaking his head, muttering about how this was impossible. My sister asked if I had won the lottery or inherited money they didn't know about. I explained my investment strategy, how I had been living below my means for years while systematically building wealth. I showed them my spreadsheets, my research notes, my carefully planned asset allocation. While they were upgrading their kitchens and buying new cars, I was upgrading my net worth. While they were stressed about mortgage payments, I was stress-free and financially independent. The revelation changed everything between us. My parents went from worried to proud, but also slightly bewildered. They couldn't understand how their seemingly unsuccessful son had quietly become the wealthiest person in the family. My brother admitted he felt foolish for all the advice he had given me over the years. My sister asked if I could teach her about investing. But the most interesting reaction came from my uncle, the one who had been most vocal about my life choices. He became defensive, almost angry, suggesting that I had been dishonest by not telling them about my success. He seemed to take my financial achievement as a personal insult, as if I had been deliberately making him look foolish for caring about my well-being. The family dynamic shifted completely after that dinner. Some of them started asking me for financial advice, which felt strange after years of receiving unwanted guidance from them. Others became oddly distant, as if my success had somehow diminished their own achievements. My parents began bragging about me to their friends, which was nice but also felt uncomfortable since nothing about my actual life had changed. I realized that money changes how people see you, even when your behavior stays exactly the same. My apartment was still small, my lifestyle was still minimal, but suddenly these things were viewed as quirky choices rather than failures. My family started describing me as eccentric and brilliant instead of struggling and lost. The weirdest part was how my dating life changed after word got out. My sister had apparently told some of her friends about my situation, and suddenly I was getting introductions to women who had never shown interest before. It was flattering but also deeply unsettling. I hadn't become a different person, just a person whose net worth was now public knowledge. Looking back, I'm glad I told them, but I also understand why wealthy people often keep their finances private. Money complicates relationships in ways that are hard to predict. Some family members became more respectful of my choices, while others became resentful of my success. The ones who truly loved me were happy for my achievement, but I could see the envy in others' eyes. 3 months later, I'm still living in the same apartment, still eating the same simple meals, still maintaining the same lifestyle that brought me financial freedom. But now when I visit family, they ask about my investments instead of my love life. They want to know about market trends instead of when I'm going to buy a house. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent years being judged for my choices, and now those same choices are being praised as genius. The truth is, I wasn't trying to be clever or strategic. I just wanted to live simply and build security for the future. I never expected that my quiet approach to wealth building would become the most interesting thing about me to my family. Sometimes I wonder if I should have kept it secret, continued living my anonymous life without the complexity that comes with family knowing about money. But then I remember that night at the wedding, the way my dad's words made me feel like a failure. And I think maybe it was time for them to understand that success doesn't always look the way they expected it to. My small apartment isn't just a place where I live anymore. It's become a symbol of my unconventional approach to life. Every time I fold my Murphy bed into the wall or heat up dinner in my tiny kitchen, I'm reminded that the most valuable things aren't always the most visible ones. My family finally understands that, even if it took $5 million to prove the point.